But I'm really looking forward to what Judge Journey has to say about the Second Amendment and the right to carry today. Let's welcome Judge Journey.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll give you that $10 I owe you after the meeting. Okay. Okay, guys. Well, you know, I wanted to have a PowerPoint for you. I really did. And we just got back from vacation, and my docket has just been crazy. But it's family law, so it's always crazy. And so, no PowerPoint for you today. But a little bit. This is supposed to be about NRA, past, present, and future. The National Rifle Association was formed in 1871 by a bunch of Union officers. It was incorporated. The original charter was in the state of New York. It's still there. It was founded by a bunch of Union Army officers. This is 6 years after the end of the Civil War. And they said, oh my God, our boys can't hit the broadside of a barn. And they couldn't. They were all from the cities, the big industrial cities of the North, where the Southern soldiers, you know, they had a lot more experience. They're out there hunting every day, you know, and they're out there shooting and whatever. And the North was at a distinct disadvantage because they couldn't hit the broadside of the barn. And that's why the Rifle Association was formed, to foster experience and teaching and competition in riflery. How did I get started? Well, I went to law school. I first got my degree in accounting from Washburn University. After advanced accounting my senior year, I said, I'm not doing this for the rest of my life. And then we went to Oklahoma City University School of Law. It was the only part-time law school program in the United States that we could find. And so I went down there to school at nights, 4 nights a week, Monday through Thursday, and then I came back and worked for my parents at Hayesville Auto Parts. Hayesville, that's how you say it. We live there. Hayesville Auto Parts. And right now, my parents are gone, of course, and I'm running it. I'm probably running it in the ground, but I'm running it. Anyway, come down and get your oil changed. Okay, so what was NRA back then, way back when? It was basically a big competition and hunting club. In 1977, the leadership of NRA wanted to sell the building that they owned in Washington, D.C. It used to be on Northwest 17th Street, and move the NRA to Colorado, where they go hunting all the time. And, you know, kind of like not really get involved that much with the political stuff. You know, they were in the 68 Gun Control Act, and the leadership was pretty much set in their ways. And that you have to understand how the bylaws work. Every year there's an annual meeting of the members. And that year in 1977, it was in Cincinnati, Ohio. And at that time, the board was less powerful and the membership was far more powerful. And so in 1977, they had the revolution in Cincinnati. The members meeting lasted till from like 10 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the morning the next day. And by the time they got done, they rewrote the bylaws, got rid of all the old guard, and changed NRA forever. And people that I knew that led that were people like Neil Knox, who has since gone to his maker. But Neil was one that helped me a bunch. And I got to know Neil. My wife, Suyapa, is here, everybody. The most tolerant woman in Kansas, absolutely. Without her, I never could have gotten any of this done. She supported me all the way, 100%, every time, and she means a whole lot to me. But after 1977, the NRA created the Institute for Legislative Action and the Political Victory Fund, which is a PAC. And their mission was to move the political needle in the United States, and they did. Culminating in 1994, Campaigns and Elections magazine had an article after that cycle that basically looked at polling, and they had effectively molded public opinion to the point that more people supported what the NRA said than either of the major Republican parties. And that was an expensive article. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, so Wayne LaPierre. First time I met Wayne LaPierre, it was, I know exactly what day it was, because it was the day Gorbachev visited Reagan in the White House. And I'm going in for my interview to be a lobbyist for Kansas. That's what I wanted to do. And I had this big old camcorder, and I got that crazy Russian limo going down the street with the guy, with the birthmark on his head, waving at everybody. And then I went into the interview, and it went really well. And they said, well, okay, we're going to send you to Nebraska. You got a problem, Bill. What are you going to do? And I said, well, like, don't you guys have like a training or something? You know, I'm just a lawyer. Jeff Freeman, everybody knows Jeff. He ended up getting that job. I turned it down because I got to stay. I said, look, I'll pay for my hotel. Can I stay a weekend, go sightseeing? They said, sure. What I did was I went shopping. And even though they were going to like double what I was making as a lawyer in private practice, there was no way I could bring my family to Washington, D.C. and live on that. And I said, I'd love to do it. You know, I'll stay active. I stayed involved in the State Rifle Association and on a local level. And then I became the election volunteer coordinator. Everybody remember Elma Broadfoot? You're all old enough to remember that. Broadfoot, narrow mind. Remember that? That's the best political slogan we ever came up with. And we put a question on the ballot in 1994, and we helped provide momentum to the wave that came across the 4th Congressional District when we defeated Dan Glickman right after he got product liability reform in place for small airplane makers. We still beat him that next time. And then with Todd Tiehart. I worked in Todd's campaign. I organized the membership here. I had a lot of lists from when we had the big City Hall meeting. We got 5,000 people to show up at City Hall, which, you know, the fire marshal had to come in and stop us. And so NRA named me Political Activist of the Year. And so that was a nice thing, for sure. Anyway, Wayne LaPierre was running ILA at that time. He had joined ILA. He came from Democrat, congressman's office, a Southern conservative Democrat. They actually did have conservative Democrats back there in history. You know, they've been all ostracized from their party. I've been elected to 3 non-consecutive terms on the board of directors. My first term was from 1995. Neil Knox played a major role in helping me get that done and through the nominating committee. I ran in 94 by petition and didn't make the cut. 95, I was nominated by the nominating committee. I came in middling. Okay, the board is 76 members. There are 25 slots every year that are up for election, and then if somebody passes away or something like that, then they become a 26th slot to run like the 2 years or the 1 year that they've got left in their term, so the cycle continues. Anyway, 1995, I was elected. 96, we made Marion Hammer president. Anybody know Marion Hammer? If you lived in Florida, you'd know Marion Hammer. Jeb Bush knows Marion Hammer. And so he does, because she ran the state like a machine with her organization there. And so she was president. And, you know, Marion she's still around. She's about 15 years older than I am. And she's kind of cranky sometimes, and she's not very tolerant. She doesn't suffer fools at all, like I have to as a judge. And so Siapa and I are at the 96 meeting in Dallas. Our little girl, Carol, was about 6 years old then, 7. And she ended up being the youngest. They have a deal. Every member meeting, they have a deal where who's the youngest life member in the meeting and who's the oldest. You know, the same guy's won the last 3 years. Anyway, and so she was the youngest one, and Marion Hammer's grandson was 2 months older. Her first year as president, she assigned me to really good committees like legislative policy and grassroots development, things I know, things I could help with. And after that members meeting, I got pulled off all my committees, was given range development because she beat her grandson. Anyway, that's how the place runs. You know, that's how it ran for 30 years. And it was horrible. And it caused horrible inefficiencies. In 1997, okay, Wayne was in a lot of trouble. Wayne became the head of NRA in about 92. By the time we got to Dallas, we were finding out things, the board was, that were not correct. Board policy was if any vendor got paid more than $100,000 in a year, they had to have a written contract. The contract had to be approved by 2 officers. There's a president and 2 vice presidents. 2 out of the 3 had to sign off on it. Well, their 2 biggest vendors, Ackerman McQueen, little public relations firm down here in Oklahoma City, and the membership corporation that does all the phone calls you guys love so much. Yeah, I know. Wayne just said, well, and it was a big controversy because they couldn't actually bill us properly, and they just said, send us this much this month. That was it. That was their bill. Services, $19,840,000, whatever. And so Wayne intentionally never had a written contract with either of those entities. It was all on a handshake. And so the board was not happy with that because basically their oversight was stymied by Wayne's decision to just do it on a handshake. We don't need no stinking contract. No. We're only spending $75 million a year with them. Nah, we don't need a contract. They don't have to guarantee services for us. In my rough math, in between my 3 terms on the board of directors, that first one, they brought in, remember Charlton Heston? They brought in Charlton Heston to save Wayne. And so the bylaws are that the board of directors elects all the officers. So Wayne's job was on the line. We lost by 3 votes out of 76. And then on one of the other executive officers, we lost by just 1 vote. And so the 33 or so board members that were purged over the next 3 years, I'm the only one that was ever elected to the board again. And a lot of them are still around. The people I served on the board with were United States senators like Larry Craig, or United States congressmen like Bob Barr. Ted Nugent was on the board with me. General Joe Foss was on the board with me. He used to be governor, I think, North Dakota or one of the Dakotas. Anyway, Congressional Medal of Honor winner, like the Navy left the island, and he's like the only flyer there. He did like 50 sorties a day. He's like siphoning gas out of other planes trying to get his going. And he saved the Marines there because the Japanese were going to invade the island and take it back. And the Navy said, we're not ready for this. You guys are on your own. We'll see you later. Good luck. And the Navy sailed off and left them on the island with just Joe Foss and his little four guys on the airplanes and stuff. Anyway, I'll never forget. We used to meet over at the Key Bridge, the Marriott, which was right there by Georgetown. And we'd walk across the Key Bridge and go to dinner. And one time I'm there, we're going to dinner with Joe Foss. I loved hearing his stories. He was so much fun. And there's these 2 little Marines. They must be like at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers or something. They're in their dress uniforms. They got little red striped pants on. He comes up behind him and goes, "You know who I am?" And they just snap their attention like that. They're looking around. "Oh, I'm General Joe Foss." And they were just like groupies at a rock concert. They go, "Oh my God, we learned about you in boot camp," And that was the caliber of people that I was there with. It was absolutely amazing. The guy that created SAS in World War II, he was there. All these guys were there. It was amazing to be in the same room with them, listen to them. And anyway, it was a lot of fun. But losing in 98 wasn't any fun at all. But anyway, so, I came back here. I kept working in the State Rifle Association. I still served NRA as their election volunteer coordinator for the 4th Congressional District after that. And then I went to, so Yapa and I would go to almost all the member meetings, and I'd stay a couple extra days and hang out at that board meeting afterwards, after the members meeting, for years, for decades. And in 2019, sorry, I ended up, 1919. Yeah, it's not that damn long ago. 2019, I go to the NRA member meeting in Indianapolis. I watched the whole thing melt down. And I don't know exactly what was going on, but I did see Oliver North basically do this to Wayne and say, and he never came back. Because Wayne said a bunch of stuff about him in letters to try to defeat him. It was all about this lawyer, William Brewer. Okay, and it's so Peyton Place. All right, Ackerman and McQueen, Angus McQueen, brilliant fellow, didn't suffer fools at all. He had a daughter named Skye and a son named Reven. Skye married this lawyer, William Brewer. And Brewer is one of those lawyers, they've got their cufflinks and they're always dressed to the nines. They got the little skinny pinstripe suit, all this stuff. Couldn't lawyer his way out of a paper bag. But, he's one of those, he's got a big ego, doing personal injury stuff, whatever. And so he got inside. And once he got inside with Wayne, they were in a lot of trouble. They had been doing a lot of things off the books, all that stuff. The truth is, if my math is correct, they probably misappropriated or stole or converted for personal use $500 million. in the 30 years between my terms on the board of directors. That's only $20 million a year for 25 years. And it went on. That annual budget for NRA is $440 million. Now we're down to about 230. If we go much lower than that, we probably won't survive. So we're trying to like make things up, try to get things restored. I created an organization called Restore the NRA. So what happened was I was watching politics and NRA, and I was watching this lady, Letitia James, who was like a public, I don't know, some weird office, like a public advocate on the city council for New York. And she ran for New York Attorney General. And I watched her campaign, and in her campaign, she said NRA members were terrorists, and that NRA was a terrorist organization, and she was going to shut them down. Well, the New York Attorney General has jurisdiction to oversee all nonprofits in the state of Kansas. Remember when they sued Donald Trump for spending $60,000 of his foundation's money on a self-portrait? Right? They shut him down. That's their job, is enforce the law and make sure. And so I knew that she was, once she got elected, she started firing subpoenas and ordering depositions of all these people running NRA. And she ended up with in the bankruptcy, I had 6 million pages of discovery, all in this huge database that costs $2,000 a month to keep alive. So, so you could find anything. It was amazing. But when I go in 19, I watch the thing melt down. One of my really good friends from the board of directors, been on the board all this time, ended up being chairman of the nominating committee. And she just tucked me under her arm, didn't tell anybody, and put me on the ballot with the rest of the nominating committee. She got in a lot of trouble for that too. And so I got elected to the board in 2020. I go to my very first board meeting, and because of COVID, the original board meeting was delayed and then set over into Springfield, or the original members meeting was moved from the date in May or April to Springfield in September, and then that one was postponed, and it ended up being in Tucson in October of 20. So in between my election in April and my taking office in October, Letitia James files her petition after she's completed her discovery. The petition was over 150 pages, listed over 500 incidents of alleged financial abuse and theft and conversion. And I got that before I went into office. And I know I had the conversation with CIAP. I'm going like, this is so much worse than I ever imagined. That petition connected so many dots for me. About 40 pages in, I puked. It made me so upset at what I realized was actually going on. And it's just like a third world country. Corruption never gets better. It always gets worse. It always gets worse. And, you ever see the poster like from, like 18th century England, where it's one guy pulling on the head of the cow and the other guy's pulling on the tail, and the lawyer's like milking the cow, right? That's what was going on. This guy Brewer was billing NRA $2,500 an hour. And his little helper lawyers, it's only a small firm, like 10 lawyers or something, were getting 15. It was crazy. And when I'd read their work, it was horrible. It was just a bunch of conclusion-oriented sophistry. And, I've read good legal work. I've read good briefs. I've read good opinions. They didn't have any of that. They didn't. It was horrible. And they just kept losing and losing and losing. And I'm running around there going like, guys, come on, let's fix this. But, I went to my first board meeting. I knew how bad it was with Wayne. I knew there was a culture of corruption in the organization. I didn't say a damn thing. Because from experience, I knew if you did, you lose. You stick your head out of the trench, someone will blow it off. So my first meeting I go to, I'm there with Suyapa, and I'm just trying to get to know everybody and kind of get the lay of the land. I could not vote for Wayne when the board does the elections. And thank goodness there wasn't another candidate, so I didn't have to write it down. I just sat there quietly and, it's my acclamation. And, I wasn't going to stick my head out and say, no, it's not. Anyway, that would have been stupid. Anyway, so I go to the second board meeting, right? And when I was on the board the first time in 95, board meetings were 2 days long. It was real work. That's how I learned committee work, When I went to the legislature, I could hit the ground running because I already had extensive experience with it. But when I go there to these new board meetings, the board meetings are about 2 hours long, and they just rubber stamp everything and they're done. Well, they do whatever staff wants, whatever Wayne wants. I'm watching all this, and I'm just aghast at what I'm seeing. So I go to the second board meeting, and NRA had one thing Brewer did was Brewer married Angus's daughter, and they hated each other. And so as soon as Brewer got inside and got Wayne's confidence, they fired ACMAC. They'd had a 30-year relationship with Ackerman and McQueen. Angus McQueen came up with things like, I'm the NRA. Great advertising, wonderful messaging, brilliant fellow. And so Angus is on his deathbed and in hospice, and Brewer sues him. And so Reven thinks that his son, thinks that Angus was killed by Brewer. And so everything just went to hell in a handbasket. And not only did Brewer's people take over the legal work, they also took over Ackerman and McQueen's work doing the public relations. They weren't very good at that either. Anyway, so it's all like Peyton Place. And so I go to the second meeting, right? And we've got all these lawsuits floating around. We're suing Ackerman McQueen. They're suing us. We've got the lawsuit from the New York Attorney General. We've got other people looking at us. There's another lawsuit from the Washington, D.C. Attorney General against the NRA's 501c3, the NRA Foundation. And I read that one too, and it was all well documented. They already had depositions. They already had everybody's testimony under oath. They already had all the documents. And so I go to the second meeting. We don't do anything. We create this deal. We do Wayne's contract, which I'm going like, can I see the old one so I can compare them? They told me no. I'm on the board. No. And then we created a special litigation committee. Because made up with the three major officers, because I figure, they've got all these suits going. There's decisions that need to be made every day, and you can't call the legal affairs committee back in to decide whether to do this or do that every other day. It's like 30 people. You can't get a quorum. Blah blah blah. So we created this special committee to do it. And we get home. We're driving back from Dallas. The meetings were in Dallas, so they were convenient for Mr. Brewer, and because he's the only one that lived there. And so Yap and I get home, and on Tuesday, I think, Monday, probably got home on Monday, went back to work on Tuesday, and on Friday, NRA files Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And I was just apoplectic. I started calling a friend that was the head of he used to be a trustee, just retired for his trustee from the state of Kansas. I called law school professors. I called national bankruptcy attorneys that I could find, doing internet searches. And the minute I said, they filed Chapter 11 and didn't tell the board, I would just get dead silence because they were just so flabbergasted that somebody actually did that. And so I got the petition, I read it, it said right there on petition where Wayne LaPierre signed it that the board was fully informed and approved of this corporate filing. Right? And on that Monday, I had cancer surgery. I had a little carcinoma on my nose, and I went in for the surgery, and it's just going to be in and out. You'll be fine, we're going to get it out. They kept digging. It's about half of a dime, right? It ended up being about more like a quarter and much deeper, and had to do what was called MOAS, which is they lift the skin off your face and move it around, and there's no scar, nothing. The kid was brilliant, but that did it. But I looked like I'd been hit in the head with a 2x4. Both my eyes are swollen shut. I couldn't go to court. So in that 2 weeks I had off, I researched the law, developed a strategy, raised the money, hired the lawyers. We drove down to Dallas, went and talked to the lawyers, and they're just flabbergasted at everything I'm telling them. And at the very end, I go, oh, here, this is for you. And it was 3 terabytes on a hard drive of all the documents and all the research that I had done. And we were the very first ones to file a motion in the NRA's bankruptcy. The motion was to appoint an examiner. I had three sitting board members join me. They stuck their head out of the trench with me. And then 3 or 4 that had been kicked out after they had their Come to Jesus meeting in Indianapolis. And they said, oh, you can say what you feel and think, and you won't be reprised. There will be no reprisals, we promise. Sure enough, there were. And about 12 of them got kicked off after that meeting. So I filed this motion. The shit hit the fan. All right. When I filed that motion, they all just went apoplectic. All right. I had to do a deposition. I was in a deposition for 8 hours with these bankruptcy lawyers. I'd never seen anything like it. I do everything in my courtroom by Zoom, unless I'm really mad at them, like this afternoon, and then they have to show up in person. And there were 120 lawyers on the Zoom hearing. I mean, all their little pictures were like this big. And I'd never seen anything like it. And so I ended up doing this deposition, and I was candid with them about it. Then I had to testify in the bankruptcy. I testified for about 6 hours. And after we filed our motion for an examiner, we wanted an examiner. One, I couldn't prove a trustee. I didn't have the facts. I didn't have the documentation. But I knew once the examiner got in and looked at the books, he'd be right back and everybody would be fired and we could start clean. And reform the organization with a members committee. That was our plan, was to have a members committee to restart, disband the board and start with a new board and new people and put it back on the best track it could be. Well, the New York Attorney General said, those lying sons of bitches, that's their filed this bankruptcy in bad faith. I want it dismissed. So my lawsuit in New York could go forward. Well, the judge did, he really didn't want to, I don't think he wanted this tornado of a case, because it was just all so bad that he just sustained her motion, dismissed the bankruptcy case. My motion for an examiner became moot, and then we had to go back to New York. New York Attorney General subpoenas me. Guess what? I get another deposition, and I'm there for about 10 hours, and then I had to go testify twice. The way the law works in New York, they have it's like a homicide trial, where they have a fact-finding phase and then they have a remedy phase. They have a fact-finding jury and then they have a sentencing jury. Okay, but they didn't have a jury in the second half. It was just the judge. So the jury, after I went and testified, we got to spend a week in New York City on the AG's dime. That was not half bad. We got grandkids in Scarsdale. So, but they did, we're going to have you testify on Monday. No, we got to move you to Tuesday. Oh, no, you're going to be on Thursday. We're so glad you're here. Have fun. And so, I came up with on that one, I do have a sort of a talent to turn a phrase. And they said, what was it like being on the board? Well, he doesn't run it like a corporation. He runs it like a kingdom. Wayne's World was too short of a reach. So it was Wayne's Kingdom instead of Wayne's World. That one made the headlines. And anyway, so the jury found that Wayne had to pay back $5 million. A bunch of other officers had to pay back a bunch more. One of them actually pled guilty and agreed to $100,000. It really should have been closer to $200 million, but the AG didn't manage their prosecution very well. And the defense, but with 4 or 5 defendants, they all got to run out the clock on them because the judge said you get 3 weeks to do your half and we'll do 3 weeks on the other half. So they ran out the clock on them. They got millions of dollars in judgments against Wayne and Woody and a couple others. And Wayne's actually paid the money and then he appealed. So I go back for the second part of the trial. I have to testify again, and that's the remedy phase. The judge was very measured. He did not disband the NRA like Letitia James wanted to do. He gave us all these little things, these little tasks we had to accomplish to make the board more of a balanced set of checks and balances rather than just having the guy at the top telling everybody, including the board, what to do. So that went really well. Now, okay, so my term is up in 23, right? I was elected from 20 to 23 while the bankruptcy and the lawsuits were going. Anybody think nominating committee renominated me? Nope. Nope. So I'm off the board again. I'm still going to the meetings. I'm still talking to some people. Some of my friends were still on the inside, because it wasn't their turn to be up yet. And so I sat off a year. I recruited a friend of mine that had been on the board for 1 year. Rocky Marshall owns this truck manufacturing company down in Texas. Awesome dude. Best numbers guy I have ever seen. He was 23. He was vice president at some Fortune 500 Houston oil company doing site management. I've never seen anybody like him. And he's awesome. And then there was another guy, Buzz Mills, who made all his money in cell towers, but he owns Gunsight Ranch kind of like his hobby job. gun sight, which is the academy, which like, learn how to shoot like a cop or whatever. And he was still on the inside of the board. Now, the board was made up of basically three kinds of people. Sycophants who thought Wayne was Jesus, and Wayne could do no wrong, no matter what he wanted. They were always there with him, 100%. Kind of sounds familiar these days. And then there were the ones that were like PTSD, domestic violence abused people who just didn't want to they just wanted to be on the board. And then there were those that were the quiet, silent ones who knew better than to stick their head out of the trench, but they were there because they love high-power shooting, or they love this, or they love that discipline. There's 76 members on the board because we need all these people with expertise to run all these shooting disciplines and all the national matches and all that stuff. But it is unwieldy when you have to fix the damn thing. I've got the plan to fix that, but that's another story. Anyway, so Rocky, me, remember Neil Knox, the one that did the Cincinnati revolt? Always a lot of struggle between him and Marion and her factions. And his boy's named Jeff. I remember when he was like 10 years old, we're going there, right? I go, Jeff, come on, let's run for the NRA board. And Jeff has been keeping his dad's organization, the Firearms Coalition, alive and writing in Gun Week and things like that all this time. Always been involved, always been trying to help NRA become a better corporate entity and operate the way it should. And then Rocky, and then another guy that's kind of a firebrand that came from Gun Owners for America, but he would just be fun, be there, And we created the Four for Reform, and it worked. We had dozens of volunteers all over the country to gather the signatures to get the petition certified to get on the ballot. To be elected, to be nominated by petition, you had to get 0.5% of the votes cast in the previous year's number of life members to sign the petition. And there's only like 2.5 million of them in the whole country. They're a little hard to find. So you have to go to gun shows, or you have to go where they are. You have to go to gun shows, you have to go to gun club meetings and stuff like that and ask them to do it. And with 4 people, you can imagine filling out name, address, membership, no, you got to have membership number, blah, 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 right? For all 4. That was a headache. And, all 4 of us got elected. 2/3 of the ballots had my name on them. And I came in second out of 26 slots. And out of the top 5 slots, there were 3 of the Four for Reform in the top 5. And then the last guy nobody knew, he came in 17th. But, we all got on the board. And fortunately, Buzz Mills was still on the board when we were all off. And he had been working with the silent ones, the quiet ones. And we provided the winning margin, the 4. And we elected the 2 vice presidents and the guy that replaced Wayne LaPierre as executive vice president. We only didn't get the presidency. And Bob Barr was kind of a thorn in our sides, and he played games with us because he had the power committees, blah, blah, blah. Kind of like a Speaker of the House, a bad Speaker of the House. Anyway, in this year, in our election, we had a slate of 24 candidates. 18 were elected out of the 26 slots, and we had a clear majority. And so now we have all of the executive offices. We are implementing the judge's orders fully throated. Everything he wants. We're going to fix it. And we're going to fix it. And, a lot of guys have picked up the ball and run with it because I come back and I'm just buried right now. But now the board is actually trying to learn how to operate as it should. And there's all these little meetings going on, and they're all looking at their mission statements and all that stuff. And I really have a lot of hope that we got rid of all the bad people as far as I can tell. There's a bunch of lawsuits now because the rats that got kicked off the ship are soon to get back on. And, and we've got to go through 2 more election cycles, and we'll sweep the rest of them from the board. And so, we need to fix it. Let me tell you why I went through this 4 years of hell. And it was hell. There were times no one would sit at my table except my wife. And if a new board member liked something that I said in the meeting, and they would come up to me and they'd say something, somebody else would jump in there and go, "Why are you talking to him? What did he say? What did you tell him?" And so it was like we were at the short bus table. you know, when they were the ones in the short bus. Anyway, it has, here's why. Okay, when I first went to law school at Oklahoma City University School of Law, all they had was law students, preachers' kids, and Miss Americas and opera singers. And a wonderful school, and they had that night school. But to get out of it, I had to write a dissertation. We all had to write a dissertation. And instead of just looking up a big case from one of my textbooks and finding a few cases after it to talk about it, I just sat there and said to myself, after 3 semesters of common law, what have they not taught me? Not one word about the Second Amendment in any of those 3 classes. I had one summer class, 6 weeks long. It was all about the First Amendment, and that's it. Great class, great school. I loved it. And so I did the research. I ended up writing a 75-page paper when it was only supposed to be 25. He gave me an A. I doubt he finished it. And and it was all about the research. I went back and I looked at the congressional record. It was so hard to find anything back then. So I went back in the congressional record when they passed the 86 Firearms Owners Protection Act, the Reagan administration, the 68 Gun Control Act, the 1933 and 1934 National Firearms Act, and Federal Firearms Act. I went and researched all those in the congressional record. I could find all the law journal articles about the topic there. And I wrote it, and I came to the conclusion that Kansas is the source of what is called the collectivist theory of the Second Amendment. That basically it's like a collective farm. If everybody has it, nobody does. All right? There wasn't an individual right to own a firearm under that interpretation, and I knew that was wrong. I read the Federalist Papers. I read what the Founding Fathers said. I read the context that they wrote, that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That is now the law from the United States Supreme Court. And I watched them build that case law up through the NRA and through the National Firearms Civil Rights Legal Defense Fund. It's another entity, sub-entity of NRA. That I watched them plan it just like NAACP planned Brown versus Board of Education. It was amazing to watch that process and to see it come to fruition. So why do I do all this? Because I know that you guys all know NRA from seeing some talking head on one of your news channels, blah, 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 doing verbal battle with these ding-dongs on the left. But what you don't see is the 95% of things that NRA does that I call the lost leaders. The women's program, the competition system, the kids programs, the Eddie Eagle program, all those things are money losers. You spend money to make those programs work. They don't make money. And one thing I learned from the bankruptcy is everybody wants the money and everybody wants the political power, but the lost leaders, they will all go away. And if we lose that support for the shooting sports, we will lose the sport in a generation like England. Because if they don't, and he didn't read it all for you, but one of the things I've done for over a decade, I need to get back at it now that I've got a little time maybe soon, someday, is enjoyed being not only an NRA pistol instructor, and I've taught hundreds of people self-defense and pistols over there years ago. I've also a master high-power rifle instructor. I hope to put on a clinic this year for shooting 600 yards with like an M1A or an M1 Garand. And then also I've done about 8 years as a firearms rifle and pistol instructor for 4-H. And I've watched these children grow up in the sport. And let me tell you, I've watched them mature. The shooting sports provide a unique opportunity to each child to understand that everything depends on what they choose to do. Whether they're successful or not depends on how they hold a gun, how they execute trigger pull, how they do sight alignment, sight picture, breathe and squeeze, and get the timing down and all that. And I watched them mature, and I came to the conclusion that if they learn to love the sport, they will learn the issue. But if all they know about firearms is what they get from Call of Duty, I'm not kidding. I got a friend that had an Army-Navy store over there on Mays Road. He said he'd have 8-year-olds come in there and go, that's an M1 carbine, that's an M1 Garand, that's a Kalashnikov, that's a SKS. They do them all from like looking at the menus on the game, which one am I going to play with today? And but if they don't learn this issue, if they don't love the sport, they'll never learn the issue. And if they don't learn the issue, we will lose the sport. That's why I've been involved in, hell, I taught 5,000 kids hunter education out at Lake Afton. You know, it's a lot of fun. It's great. You really get a lot out of it. And if you know a grandkid, I know some of you have grandkids, like we start them out at 8 years old in 4-H on BB guns. They're shooting 5 meters, not like the crappy thing you get at Walmart. It's actually fairly precise. It's got nice dual match sights on it. They're micrometer adjustable. They're plastic, but they still work. And they're shooting 5 meters. We got kids that score 480 out of 500. Shooting 5 meters with a muzzle loading smoothbore BB gun. And then once they turn about 12, they can go up to air rifle and air pistol. With air rifle and BB gun, we have rules so that we don't have an equipment race. I mean, you know, I have air rifles that knew they were about $3,500. You know, go shoot the Olympics with it. 10 meters. And I've really enjoyed the sport. I've loved it. I think that what you can do, what could you do? One, join the NRA. We need annual members. Go on our website. It's like $35, $50. You can catch a sale once in a while, you know. But join. Great magazines. We have a women's only magazine now that is just outstanding. We've got the American Hunter, the American Rifleman, which is more kind of like the Hunter's obvious. The Rifleman's more like competitive shooting. And then there's First Freedom, which is more like the political action end of it. So you can pick any one of those magazines. You can get an extra one if you want. And they're great publications. When you're a member, you'll be able to donate to the Political Victory Fund, which only members can donate to that. And that goes straight to the candidates. And we spend it like, you know, $20 million. We made the difference for Trump in 2016, absolutely. You know, we made the difference in '94 with the Republican Revolution there. I think one mistake they've made is that they've become too Republican centrist. I think we need to go into the Democratic Party and raise up a bunch of conservative Democrats that are, you know, pro-life or, you know, pro-gun, and start beating them in primaries. And put a little dissension in their ranks instead of us fighting it in ours only. Now I want NRA to lift them up. Questions? I know it's been too long. Yeah, thank you so much.
The scandal. How are you going to turn that around to promote membership?
Okay, that's a hard question. Okay, one thing I think they should do real damage control. It's really hard to get these people to say a mea culpa to the membership. They've tried kind of half-heartedly a couple times. I don't think it's been enough. The truth is that from about the point they started getting in trouble in 2019 or 2020 to 2023, we lost 1,000 members a day net. We went from over 5.2 million to about 3.5 right now. So we've only got about 1 million annual members. The association lives and dies on annual memberships. When I bought my life membership and my wife's life membership 30 years ago, you know, they have to get me to donate. They don't get another dime. And when that money comes in the door, it goes out. They don't have like a reserve account to pay for everybody's magazines till they die. You know, we've got like 10,000 members that are over 100 years old. So we need to clean that up too. But we have to get the membership to understand what we've done, what we've gone through, and where we're going. And then they'll come back if we can just get that word out. But you know, it's not a man bites dog story. It's not newsworthy. So it's difficult for them to do that with earned media. Yes, sir.
Well, you addressed part of my question about the life membership. How does that make economic sense?
Well, it did when the money comes in the door, but yeah.
Somebody can spend
Yeah.
They can spend it.
Well, you know, to address that problem, they came up with other things like the Golden Eagles, which is like an annual assessment for life members, $100 or something like that. And there's another one, and there's different levels, and they could go up, and if they go up high enough, they get a private reception, and they get to mingle with the board or whatever, you know. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. The members' meetings are amazing. If you've never been to the SHOT Show, you ought to go. I think it's in Houston this year, isn't it? Yep, it's in Houston this year, and then we go back to Georgia the next year. So,
When do you guys get out of New York State, reincorporate into a place that's not in the same?
you know, when I was on the board the first time, we floated that, and to get out of the state, to get the Attorney General's seal of approval that you can leave the state of New York, you have to pass her audit. And they never wanted to open the books to her. So they never did it. Because they knew how bad it was. I didn't know how bad it was, really. I had like little inklings, you know, going like, that doesn't smell right. But when I read that petition, and it's there online, you know, it's still there. Yeah, when I read that petition, I did puke. I just couldn't believe what I was reading. Wayne's administrative assistant, Millie, stole $60,000 from NRA to pay for her kid's wedding. And he didn't fire her. It was just one grifter helping another. That's all it was. I mean, that's just an example. It was like he'd spend $7,000 an hour on a Gulfstream to go get his wife's niece in Nebraska so she could go to a meeting with him. You know, couldn't just send her an economy ticket and say, have fun. Don't forget to make your change in Chicago, you know. It was things like that. It was just absolutely ridiculous. Things I just couldn't believe were true until I saw the bill. I'm going like, oh my God. You know, they had a private travel agent that made $1 million a year from just, you know, booking this, booking that, whatever they needed. I mean, she was really good, but she wasn't cheap either. Yeah, it's nuts. It's just nuts. Oh, just Google me. You'll read about it. Yeah, just Google me. You'll read about it. Yeah, really. Just don't look at that goddamn CNN interview. But anyway, sons of bitches.
Well, thank you for everything that you've done for gun freedoms in Kansas. I'm a life member, basic pistol instructor, friends with me as a life member. I don't know how many of you folks are NRA members or what have you, but there's a big rift in the gun community with everything. The NRA's got a lot of bad press, a lot of bad.
Horrible press. Horrible press. Yeah.
Gun owners of America, who does a wonderful thing. The point I'd like to make, I don't know if it's a question, there will be, I guess. But the NRA has done more for instruction, marksmanship, things like that than any of them. And with gun owners in America and all of this, I would like to see more crossing over, you know. I think it was Benjamin Franklin said we must all hang together or we will most assuredly hang separately.
I hear you. You know, I've known Larry Pratt, who run GOA, for decades. His wife is from Guatemala, mine is from Honduras, and they would sit in the back at the gun owners policy conference and just have a great time. And I'm up there going like, what's he saying to my wife there? You know, I'm up there at the podium talking, and I just loved it. But go look at the FEC reports. Just look up NRA, Second Amendment Foundation, Gun Owners of America. You'll see who does the heavy lifting. No one approaches anywhere near what NRA, Institute for Legislative Action, and Political Victory Fund get accomplished every political cycle. We spend $30 million, they spend $60,000. But that's members' money, members' donations that go out there and make all the difference in the world. The most important thing we do in state legislative races, and we're involved in 15,000 legislative races every cycle, is those little orange postcards that go to every member and say, this is the candidate that's endorsed. Because he will take that card to work. He will take that card to dinner with his in-laws. He will take that card and show them, but you have to be a member to get the little orange postcard and to get the magazine that grades every legislator in your state. And we do that in all 50 states nationwide. No one does what NRA does, and no one will replace us. That's me. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.